Welcome to Andronetalks News. Today I want to talk about something that I kind of wanted to step back and not talk about it right away, and that is the incident with Charlie Kirk. And I just needed to really wrap my head around this. I know that there's so many different perspectives and a lot of information starts to leak out over time. I talked to Peter about it, and I will allow him to make his formal announcement from the ACIO perspective. But I wanted to share some things that people have been sending me, and it really stood out to me about what is actually going on. There's many layers to this. If you think that you just looked at one thing and then you come to a conclusion, or just some of the things that people are pointing out to you, you need to step back and look at the broader spectrum of this, because this is something that has been going on for years, many years. So the idea of using assassinations to destabilize a population, to make them feel like they've lost their footing, and to create this kind of panic scenario. I want you to think about how we're still thinking and dwelling on earlier assassinations that have occurred, such as Abraham Lincoln, and the major effect that that had on our nation, particularly preceded by a civil war, which is something else that is part of the agenda. And you can see that this follows through even up until our time. So let's consider the Kennedy issue, including JF Kennedy and RF Kennedy, who, two brothers, were involved with the Cold War and many other things going on in the background that people still are looking into and still do not have fully the answers to it. And the question is all of these different phenomena. Martin Luther King is another one who they also used as a statement. When I say they, this is where it gets complex. And are the same individuals that were involved with the first assassination? Let's go back further. What about Franz Ferdinand and his assassination that started World War I? Assassinations have been used for political statements to create upheaval and problems. So there was an attempted assassination. Ronald Reagan was another attempted assassination, as well as Donald Trump. Also, I mentioned earlier Martin Luther King, but there was also Malcolm X. And then we can even look at John Lennon as someone that heavily influenced the culture at that time. And still to this day, people sing the song Imagine, considering what had happened. This is a societal trauma. This is something that's intended to traumatize the masses, along with levels of propaganda, which is what people are feeling. They're feeling tricked, they're feeling betrayed, they're feeling frustrated. What is happening? And why is it happening so often in the US? So there's many players in the game, but there's also, we can look at governmental, we can look at elites, we can look at competing nations and the powers of the world leveraging, disagreeing with things of the United States. We can look local. We can look at Utah. And someone sent me something that I thought was very interesting, and they were bringing up information about Mitt Romney. And all of a sudden, I started thinking, oh, yeah, well, Mitt Romney, who is originally from Utah, somehow ended up in my hometown and became the governor of Massachusetts. And I remember that the frequency that changed during that time. I mean, I felt like there were anomalies and there were all sorts of different things going on. And the belief system is not just a belief system. I believe that they hooked into something in the past, and I'm not going to go off on the Mormons, but clearly, just like any very strong religious system, there is a system behind those systems. So my friend, who pointed out something about, started mentioning something about the Fast and the Furious and the control of weapons, or the idea of trying to remove weapons from everyone in the United States. And so that in the event, or maybe a planned event, of some type of invasion or control system, or very submissive efforts to destabilize the Americans or take over from another nation, whatever the multi-agendas going on, one of the first methods is to remove weapons. Well, of course, the weapons never get removed from those who are committing criminal activity. It's always the people that want to defend or protect themselves. And albeit there are people that are not qualified or have a weapon, don't know how to use it, there are people that are getting trained with weapons. And they're behaving in a way that are more like a soldier rather than just a local hunter. And that is definitely the case regarding Tyler Robinson. The first time I viewed the footage of what he did and the way he scaled up on top of the building, the way he was so comfortable, wasn't nervous, didn't hesitate, had already done this multiple times, knew exactly what he was doing. And even if he is not the one that actually shot Charlie Kirk, if there was another from another perspective, it doesn't matter. I mean, of course it does as far as who is actually the one that did this. But it's clear that this individual was trained. And I felt immediately this is not just a local hunter. It was stealth in the way that he behaved, and something that you might see a SWAT team do or a sniper do. And what we found out is that he too was also in the Ukraine. So now we're looking at something that's linking closer to what Peter has been dealing with in our team. And that is something that we refer to as the Sixth Reich. Sixth Reich is making maneuvers and integrating, and as Peter had warned us, is actually wanting to take over, particularly the western part of the US. I mean, there's no hesitation in that respect. What is my proof? Okay, so I have this video and we can take a look at it. Now, this just to give you a little bit of a background first. Sixth Reich is the Azov group connected to Zelensky and his interests. Obviously, he is more than just human, and he's been doing a lot of different things that, if you really step back and take a look at it, he's small in stature. He technically was an actor by trade. Suddenly, he becomes not only the leadership of the Ukraine, but the leadership of a movement to gather all the Western world to align with him against Russia, which is inciting this massive war. And how did he get the ability and persuasion to do this? And we've had many people, many different powers, but to be able to have everyone constantly sending him money, sending him weapons, sending him anything that he needs. There's clearly another power there that is being overlooked. And some of their symbology is a Z. So I know I pointed out the Z as being connected to the Azov group, and technically the Z alone is identified with the Russian military. So the true Azov symbol, the actual emblem of the Azov Brigade, combines the Latin letters N and I, representing the national idea, the core principle of the Ukrainian National Guard. Anyhow, so if we turn the N sideways, it's a Z. I mean, it could also be that they're connected to the Russian military. There's no other reason for the Z to be there that I can see. But all other indications seem to hint of the Azov group and the Sixth Reich being connected to this. And if anyone's interested, we do have a video about it. So this is from Forgotten History, ATF, Operation Fast and Furious, Forgotten History. And it's called a part of Project Gunrunner. And as I said, I can't fully get deeply into this. I'm going to give you the video. Obviously, contrary to what people believe, I do not have the agencies protecting me. I have the CIO, but this kind of stuff is pretty dangerous. And like I said, I could pass off the information and let people see it. So here we have, this Obama's involved. There's, weapons that end up going south of the border and so forth. And then finally we get to around the 18-minute point, and I'm just listening and thinking, well, this is interesting.
Across the border and into Mexico, but that Fast and Furious number, quantity, and type of weapon.
Interesting enough, there's literally a Z, which is the symbology of the Azov group. And so my question is, why is that there? Other than here is the other connection that we were looking for. So as I said, I recommend listening to this, and let's go into the Fast and Furious because Peter's been talking about them for years. And interesting enough, this group was called the Fast and the Furious because they were actually racing cars similar to the movie. So what comes first, the movie or the activity of what's been going on? Here's the bio or the information about the film. And of course, this is a series. Brian O'Connor, back working for the FBI in Los Angeles, teams up with Dominic Toretto to bring down a heroin importer by infiltrating his operation. So whether these runners, these racers, are how deeply they're involved, we further talked about Dominic Toretto, aka Vin Diesel, as we know him as an actor. So let's look at Vin Diesel. Now, Peter talked about him being a part of the Camers. The Camers are the ET group that are under Puerto Rico. We're going to look at the Chronicles of Riddick. I know some of you are acquainted with Pitch Black. Now, I believe that the Camers are a good group, but in this case, I have a problem with Vin Diesel. I believe that there's some other, quite a few other agendas there. And also the fact that there is a connection to the Butcher Bay prison. And so being around him, going along with whatever he was doing, actually leads to an off-world prison. And whoever they feel that they want to put in that off-world prison. interesting that someone by the name of Falco who kind of dies strangely. Um, and let's take a look. So this is the film for Riddick. I hope some of you don't think I'm just going off on a tangent here, but this is very important because I was threatened when I was told to put the information about Butcher Bay on the website. And they challenged me and said that I shouldn't. And I told Peter, I said they threatened me if I would post this, that there would be problems for me. And so I didn't want to post it because I know that they are doing this, and this is something else that is a problem. In which group? This is an off-planet group that is working with Butcher Bay. It's kind of like the Black Iron prison, also. That is one of the moons of Jupiter, and Butcher Bay is actually on Jupiter. Now, some other people, there are civilians in Butcher Bay and there are scientists in Butcher Bay, but there are also prisoners there. I believe what's happening is off-world, and Peter has another piece of it that I promised that I would let him share rather than me, so that he can go either more into detail or just make the statement himself. I believe that our Earth is not fully being run by humans. And so this is where people say, well, it hasn't been disclosed yet. Yeah, well, we can't wait for people to decide whether the government agrees with us or not. Clearly, the ACIO has been working with off-world ETs as well as inner Earth and hybrids that are being created, and scientists and all sorts of various agendas and corporations from the past and the future. So there's an array of different things. It's up to us to try to figure out where is this coming from and put the pieces together. So currently, we're dealing with this Azov group, and that's where the missions are coming from with Peter the Insider. And the ultimate point, when things are said and done, is probably going to Butcher Bay, with the Fast and the Furious being in the forefront, but also other corporations are involved in this. I believe Charlie Kirk is gone, but I believe that he is in another context of existence. We know another aspect of him, and that aspect of him is safe. I believe the agenda was to actually go after Trump or intimidate Trump. And since they couldn't get Trump, they got closer to him without, that was the sacrifice or the message, if you know what I mean. Like I said, when they do these things, these are happening in and out of the dimensional space. That's why it's confusing because people are trying to capture it. And I'm going to re-emphasize the JFK incident where people, very, very smart people that work in this field, still looking at what happened with JFK. And it's a time-space anomaly. They can shift and change as time travelers there while they're doing certain things. We see that in the Umbrella Academy. So there's an array of different types of scenarios that creates this abnormality of time space. Because sometimes the real assassins are not even in our reality. They appear and then disappear. And this is the work that we've been dealing with. And that's what happened with Franz Ferdinand. Is someone that appeared and then disappeared. And then they reappear again, and then they disappear. So Trust me, I'm not taking any of this lightly. And like I said, um, the other part is the division and the cruelty and the desensitization of humanity, which is causing people to say he deserved it. He needed this to happen. You know, that's his fault for trying to change things. That's his fault for speaking out against people's lifestyle or what have you. And I think, as I said, they're creating these extreme left and right views to create a clash where people are nowhere in a point where they're trying to understand one another, but are getting very angry. And both sides are retaliating, which is a win-win for them and a trauma for generations to come. I know that, there's a tendency between movies and video games that we see violence every day. And so we start to become desensitized by it. That too was intentional. So that they're looking at this incident as if it was something that everything looks fictitious, everything. The anger that came out of this was just as shocking as watching an assassination. The anger. It's the whole scene of watching JFK slumping over in his car. That's traumatic. But in that case, you didn't have people saying he deserved it. He should have died, or that was coming to him, and he was bucking the system. And we all know that. And so, same thing with Charlie Kirk. I think people were a little shocked. How can you be that insensitive to someone that has left children behind? And whether you agree with him or not, he had an opinion. And I think for anyone that talks about alternate news or freedom of speech, it makes you think, well, do people think that, you're going to control how everyone speaks to people? And a lot of those students went there on their own, and they had a right to contend and disagree. And he had a right to say something, and the discourse should be allowed because if we don't have a discourse, that's unhealthy for everyone. People should be able to express their rights or beliefs without risk or threat of their own life. And that's the part that I was struggling over. Should people or should not people be able to speak what they feel or believe, even if it's not right? Should you threaten someone because they don't agree with you? And I've had, I can't say hundreds of people over the years say some really horrible things, not even knowing why, even accusing me of things that I've never said or done. And there's a lot of anger out there. I know that there's propaganda. I know that there are people that, or they're not even people, sometimes it's bots, what have you, and the internet is kind of shady in that way. But the public are living in some kind of bubble of propaganda, media, and all sorts of different things. And what they consider as societal norms, what they consider their peers or what their friends believe in. And the anarchists and those that the influences of Antifa or other groups, and even still, that people should have a right to speak out and say how they feel without the risk of death. Otherwise, we become something else. So that's what was causing me to hesitate. And As I said, there'll probably be more conversations about this, but I'm opening up conversation here in the comment section. I never really followed Charlie Kirk very closely. I saw his lovely wife and children. I think that influenced me. I've seen him have discourse with people. Um, and also the way that the state operated in the school. And it seemed like it wasn't completely protected, similar to when Donald Trump had the attempted assassination. So it felt like, I don't know, something going on with security, or they're just not expecting anything bad to happen. But it changes. It changes the level of anxiety in the US, the way people will be traveling, the way people feel about going to large events, discouraging people from participating or any types of rallies. That too seems like an agenda. So keep digging, people, keep looking and searching, but don't lose your consciousness in the process. It's okay. I was unhappy about our last administration, but still did not wish assassinations or anything like that. I mean, still, people have the right to have their expression and belief. And if others are harmed in the process, I do ask that there's justice for something. There's definitely the karmic rule. I know some people don't believe in that, but I do feel strongly about it. And I do think what goes around comes around. And if you have a lot of anger, find the source of the anger. Don't take it out on strangers or anything else that's unrelated. Work on yourself. Work on yourself to be a better person. Work on yourself to still be searching and digging into truths, but not to the point where you're doing equally horrible things in the process. So, with that said, thank you for listening.